This is May 26th, 2020, and I'm commenting on this book, Religion Explained. This is chapter 4. Up till now, we've talked mostly about what the mind is about. There's been some talk of religion, but not a lot. But now he goes right head on into religion. He doesn't like the term religion much, but we'll get to that eventually. First thing he wants to say is that supernatural concepts matter. People believe in God's or ancestors' existence, not in Santa and the boogeyman. They actually do believe in that the Kaio people or the Fang people, they believe in their ancestors. People believe in Jesus. People believe in the prophet Muhammad. And yet, what he wants to say about religion is it's practical. It really is about, one of our problems is that Western people are pretty educated, and religion in some sense has become sort of abstracted. It's become more about contemplative kinds of things, and so it seems to be kind of distanced. Perhaps since I went to seminary and I really learned about that there are really two religions, not just one. One is the sort of educated seminary kind of religion, and the other is popular religion. Popular religion is very much, in the Western world, very practical. It's people are sick, they pray to Jesus. It's all about need and the necessity of dealing with what's going on now. And that's really the first point he makes about religion being practical is, he says, first, religious concepts are represented by people mostly when there is a need for them. This can be certainly reflected in a lot of things like if you just look at church attendance during World War II and the 40s and the 50s, church attendance was way up because the world was pretty anxious, first about the war, first about the Great Depression, but then about the Second World War, which after all did kill more than 66 million people. So a lot of anxiety there, and so the need was high, and so religion was pretty popular just by vote of going. I think the second thing he wants to say is what is a constant object of intuitions and reasoning are practical situations of interactions with these supernatural agents. It's practical. He makes this term over and over and over again. People actually interact with these beings in a very concrete sense of doing things to them, experiencing them doing things, giving and receiving, paying, promising, threatening, protecting, placating, and so on. So it's a practical interaction. He talks then extensively about an example from the Kaio people, and they have a term, adalo, which refers to deceased members of their own clan as well as dangerous wild spirits. And dealing with these adalo is they use divination. They have a local shaman who comes and does whatever the shaman does in order to discover what the problem with the ancestor or the wild spirit is, and then they try to then they make a sacrifice, and if that doesn't work, they do it again. So it says, so people may go through several cycles of divination followed by sacrifice to reach a satisfactory arrangement with their ancestors. The person who did the work with the Kwaio people was a guy named Roger Kiesling, and at one point he was this is a great little story. He was out walking with one of the younger members of the community, and they were out on the road between villages or what. There weren't other people around anyway. He was carrying a big stick, and the young man, or the young boy, said to him, he was whistling, and the young boy said to him, "Stop whistling. You'll upset the Adalo." And he said, "Well, I'm carrying a big stick, so I can defend myself against them." And he received a lecture on the futility of such a defense against the Adalo. This is a young kid, so you can see that very early they learn about the Adalo, and the Kwaio ancestors are a perfect example of supernatural agents who matter to the people, that cause all kinds of good things, but also all kinds of bad things to happen to them. Interestingly enough, there is a god who is much more supernaturally powerful than the ancestors. Mabegi is the name of the god, and in the Christianized areas of the Kwaio people, there is a Nazim, who is the name of the god. But these gods are more somewhat detached from them. It's the ancestors who cause all the difficulties. And it's a practical thing. They simply are taking care of themselves in a particular way. What all people do are precise descriptions of how these agents can influence their own lives and what they have about them. Now, beyond that, there is a they don't have, he says that this is true of most I suppose cultures. There is no word for religion. Actually, he could have consulted somebody like Kathleen Kennedy, and he would have known that these religious brand ideas are really only about 300 years old. When the British went into India, they had to have some way of dealing with the Hindu religion. Muslims were pretty organized, but the Hindus they had all kinds of gods, and so they created the Hindu idea as sort of the brand for it. And all of these, of course, the Christian religion has a long history in Western Europe, but as a brand, that's a more recent use of the religious term. But what the people are concerned about, what he says, what is most concerning is really acting with agents, supernatural agents. There was a study done by a guy named Justin Barrett, and he was taking Western people, Christians, and he asked the subjects to imagine various situations where they needed to pray, and One was about a ship that had hit an iceberg. So they had a number of things they could have prayed for. One would have been to keep the ship from physically sinking. Another would be that God would intervene with a human being on another ship and bring them closer so they could help out. And that, by the way, was the vast majority of what people look for. The idea that God would affect the mind of another human being seemed a much more powerful focus for prayer than the miraculous changing of biology or physics. So I guess we've all learned our science lessons as it is. God as a person-like agent who interacts with them, that was the main object of Barrett's prayer. Now, I want to make a couple of comments. Just first of all, I've already mentioned that just measuring by attendance, World War II and the 40s and the 50s were a time of the fear of communism and the Soviet Union. These are kind of irrational fears, but attendance was way up. So for Westerners, it's practical too, in that one's safety and one's need is really paramount to what is going on. Already mentioned the idea that this whole brand idea of religion is actually a new thing, that it's only in the sort of world religions that the idea of branding really became important. But in doing that, it became a kind of an abstraction, and people then sort of forgot. But I guess, I don't know how much anthropologists have done studies of Western religion, but, praying to Jesus or praying to Allah or praying to Yahweh, those are usually very practical prayers. So Western people are really, while at the the sort of intellectual level of religious life, there is that level of religion, but then there's, at the popular level, it is all about the practical. We spend a lot of time praying for healing and praying for the dead, praying and being thankful for the life that we have. Those are sort of the main, very practical parts of religious life. Right now we're going through a pandemic, and so our prayers are about those who have died or are dying from it, and those who are sick from it, and also for those who are doing their best to ameliorate the effects of it, those healthcare people and first responders and essential people, as they are called. That's very practical prayers, and I fully agree with them that religion is practical in that sense. I do want to inject a little bit of the history of at least American religion in this place. In 1800, probably about 5 to 10% of the population was churched. By the end of the 19th century, 98% of the population claimed some relationship with a church, synagogue, ashram, temple, whatever. 98%. Now, By the 1970s, that was down to 60% probably. And it's gone down a little bit, but it's somewhere between 50 and 60% of the population has an active relationship with an active, that could be twice a year, or it could be every week, or it could be watching the religious programs every day. It doesn't, I'm not trying to be specific here. What I'm trying to say is that the 19th century was an evangelical century, and what it did was create a cultural phenomenon where everybody was related in some way to religion. In the 1960s, the wealthy people and the intellectuals discovered they didn't have to have religion anymore. The sinners in the hands of an angry God no longer was a fearful image for many wealthy and educated people, so they just left the church. Many of them, not all of them, but many. So the demographics of at least the religious life in the United States, as I understand it, is kind of an up and down thing. But at base, it's practical. It's about praying for people's problems in the now. And so I fully agree with what he says about religion being practical. I will have some arguments with him as we go along. He's pretty anti-clerical when it comes down to it. But we'll talk about that later. Anyway, take care. Bye-bye.